Hey Foster, this is Mrs. Skoglund. Just wanted to give you a little feedback on your summer assignment. So we're mostly going to talk about chapter 2 because that was the question that you had starred, but I'll kind of reference some other parts of your project throughout the video as well. All right, so the first thing that I look for in a body paragraph, which is what this structure is a topic sentence, and ideally we want that to be your first sentence that answers the question so that I know where you're going in the paragraph. I felt like, Foster, you sort of talk about the question, like you say the effects of Abundance Asia automation have to do with like supply and demand, but that doesn't directly tell me what those are doing to our directed thinking. So maybe a little more clear there. I noticed that in other paragraphs as well. So this is like, what's the difference between R and L directed thinking? And you just kind of say there's two different ways to think using your brain, which doesn't explicitly really tell me the difference. So I think you're on the right track. You just maybe need to work on being a little more specific in answering that question, okay? Next, I actually look at the end of your paragraph for a concluding sentence because we want that to also tie back to the question and sort of signal to the reader that the paragraph is ending. I noticed a lot of times, Foster, that you have a piece of commentary after this second quote, which is great, and that's what we want. But like in this paragraph, I couldn't really find a concluding sentence. Like I think this is more commentary. And then in some of your other paragraphs, like you had multiple sentences, but I'm not convinced that one of them is a concluding sentence. Okay, so I think it just needs to be a more explicit conclusion that like summarizes what the paragraph has said, maybe touches on the importance, but just really, ties everything together. So I would encourage you to go back and work on, honestly, the first and the last sentences in your paragraphs. Next, Foster, I looked at evidence, and I think this is really the strong point of your writing right now. So I really like your selection of evidence. Like up here, you have a quote about abundance. Down here, you have one more about automation. And so I like that because I think that helped you to differentiate your evidence and really develop the paragraph nicely. You're also doing a really nice job with what we call embedding, or how you integrate your evidence. So like this one, if I read it out loud, says, when Pink was younger and shopping for school supplies, there would be maybe a dozen racks of clothing, blah, blah, blah. Even with the quote, that blends together really nicely and it flows really easily as I read it out loud. And that's exactly what we want. So great work there. Keep that up. Next, I looked at your commentary. I definitely think you're on the right track with commentary in that you're not just like literally summarizing the quote. I like also, and I'm going to look at this one about automation, I like that you are trying to tie it back to the question, which is about R-directed thinking, so you're trying to make that connection. I guess I would like to maybe see your commentary expanded a little more. So for example, like this one, you're talking about how basically computers can do all this programming so much more efficiently than humans can, right? And so you say our directed jobs don't have this kind of competition. Well, why is that? Like, walk me through how, a computer can't empathize or a computer doesn't really find meaning. So I think just expanding that commentary a little bit would be helpful in analyzing the evidence. All right, next I looked at conventions and citations. So conventions, like obviously I can see that you've proofread and have a grasp of capitalization, punctuation, things like that. I do encourage you, Foster, to watch out for personal pronouns, especially you and your. Those just make your writing really informal and a little too informal for what we're going for in this kind of assignment, at least in the L-directed questions. So even just saying, if someone is feeling safe about their office job, that's really going to elevate that word choice. In-text citations were perfect, so no complaints there. Keep that up. And then I did want to talk about your R-directed activities. I thought those looked good as well. And I especially liked your play activity. My husband plays a lot of Overwatch, so I'm somewhat familiar with it. But what I liked that you said is that you had to use a lot of teamwork. I think that's something that's really important in play, and probably the reason that play is going to become so important in the future. So I was just kind of reflecting on that piece of your assignment. Anyway, just wanted to give you some feedback.